It's the beauty of post-production.
I'm waiting for those AI video editing tools to work in real time so that in a meeting, you just remove the likes and the ums.
I love that. Yeah. Like a universal translator from Star Trek or something. It just edits.
Mostly for people I have to listen to.
Oh, that's beautiful. Man, that sounds like an opportunity. Maybe that could be your next thing.
Yeah.
Anything else before we start? Any questions?
No, I don't think so.
All right, awesome. Let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. Before we jump into the episode today, I want to give a shout out to Aman Wheel for leaving me some awesome feedback for the Beyond UX Design book. Don't forget, if you get the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book, you leave some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show, a badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker, a free book, or even a chance to have a one-on-one with me. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book and pre-order your copy today. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. That's less than $1 an episode. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. For more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. This week's episode is brought to you by Jeff White and his UX Storytelling Toolkit. Now, lots of people talk about the importance of storytelling for UX designers, but Jeff brings actionable clarity to the concept, and he shows you exactly how to do it. He breaks down different real-world scenarios, like how to use different storytelling methods to present your work to clients and stakeholders, how to craft a better case study for your portfolio, and how to improve portfolio presentations for job interviews. I love Jeff's approach to storytelling here. It's not your simple once-upon-a-time kind of stuff. And since you're an amazing listener, and I know this course will help you out so much, I've partnered with Jeff to get everybody listening a 10% discount if you use the code BeyondUX when you check out. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/storytelling and use the code BeyondUX to check out to get 10% off Jeff's storytelling course. Learn some incredible techniques to influence your team and advance your UX career. So as a UX designer, you have probably heard all kinds of people on LinkedIn, the internet, wherever, telling you about, visual design is important, it's critical. Great design affects how us humans, we perceive the quality of things. There's all these psychological concepts like the hero effect, the horns effect, the aesthetic usability effect. But then you've probably also heard people on the other end say, forget about perfection. Get feedback early, get feedback often. Don't wait until it's pretty. Just get that feedback right now. It's a paradox. It's a conundrum. Well, a few weeks back, I was talking to Scott Mackie about this very topic, my guest today, and I thought this was such a super fascinating concept, this idea there's a balance between quick and dirty and clean and refined, and how do we strike that balance between the two? So I am really excited to talk to Scott about that today. Originally from New Zealand, Scott started his career as a mechanical engineer, designing medical devices to treat respiratory disease and then diabetes. He spent 5 years in the UK, including a master's at the Judge Business School of Cambridge University, studying technology policy, as well as a stint as a management consultant. And then he moved over to IDEO's Cambridge, Massachusetts office. During his nearly 6-year stint at IDEO, he broadened his skills to include design research, digital design, UX design, and design leadership. And since leaving IDEO, Scott has built and led design teams from 6 people up to 90 people at Qantas, a small bleeding-edge wearable startup, at athenahealth, a $15 billion SaaS company providing the primary daily tool for clinicians across the country, and most recently at Indigo Ag, a unicorn startup creating financial incentives for sustainable agriculture. Scott, I am so excited to talk to you today. Welcome to Beyond UX Design. Great to have you.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's great to be here. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple weeks back, you and I were talking, and we started talking about this idea, this sort of paradox. It's kind of this thing. As junior designers, they hear one thing, then they hear another thing, and the two seemingly do not go together.
Yes.
And I just wanted to get your thought. You've been doing this for a long time. You've probably, $15 billion SaaS company all the way over to startups, these tiny little startups. How do you balance between the two? This is what I want to dive in today. But before we do that, I know I read your bio. I kind of talked a lot about that, but tell us a little bit more about you and how did you get to this point today where we're talking about this?
Well, I followed my nose, I think. I've definitely been opportunistic in my career, and it's taken me into different and interesting places. When I first went to university, I didn't know what I was going to do. I did law and the engineering intermediate year. I liked law, but I loved the physical design of mechanical engineering. I lucked into a great job after university that included a lot of prototyping and feedback. The company I worked for didn't have the theory and the words for it, but they just inherently knew that was the right way to develop products. I landed a job in Cambridge, that's in the UK. I turned up to London, took a while to find work, and in the end, I got a job in Cambridge, UK, which meant that I then got to meet a whole bunch of people at the university and was inspired to pursue a master's there. And I think because of that and the policy element, which I wasn't looking for, I was interesting to IDEO. And so then I took a job in the States. I followed my now wife to Boston, to Cambridge, Mass. And I didn't even know who IDEO was at that point. I was just like, oh, they're willing to give me a visa. They didn't have the brand in the UK that they had in US business, although some of the founders were British. And so I hadn't heard of them. I was like, am I going to join like an industrial design shop? Like, what is this place? And the first day I walked in, they were working on spinal surgical tools. Actually, a super cool project.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds
the industrial designer had been inspired by the surgeons, Audis and BMWs in the parking lot. And so he designed these spinal surgical tools to look like these beautiful German sports cars on the outside.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Incredible electrical and mechanical engineering inside, lots of invention. They stole a mechanism from like a pruning device that they found a patent for. They were like, this is the way to cut steel rods that are attached to somebody's spine, like while they're in somebody's spine. So yeah, loved IDEO.
That's incredible. Yeah.
At IDEO, really just diversified. It was just exposed to this whole world of design more generally, to ethnographic research, which I got a little bit of in that first job by going into hospitals, but learned all the theory of that. And then I arrived in 2008 at IDEO. And so the App Store had just launched. The iPhone was a new thing. And every client turned up and wanted an app for that. And so it just, my transition to digital just kind of happened to me. And I do miss hardware. I'd love to work on hardware again. But, my last 2 jobs have been purely software.
Yeah, you've got a varied background. That's pretty amazing. So working at IDEO, I think one of the things they're known for is their design thinking workshops and their early iteration and validating early and often and things like that. And I think everybody understands the value of that. But for those who might not be aware, let's talk a little bit about the value of that early feedback and why that's so critical. And tell me some of the things more specifically unique to you that you learned, I think, from IDEO, because they're sort of, when I think about this like early prototyping iteration, they're sort of the masters at that. So talk a little bit about that and your experience at IDEO. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think the thing, if there's one key principle that I wish everybody in the world honestly would understand, particularly leaders at big companies and small companies investing millions of dollars in development, there's a lot of emphasis these days in building and shipping. I think you talk to any designer or design leader, you would hear the same thing if they've had the experience, which is they spend so much money. Like a single Scrum team costs a company, depending on where they're located, anywhere between $500,000 and $2 million a year, right? Like a top flight squad of engineers at Amazon or Google, that's at least $2 million a year, right? Companies almost always underspend on figuring out what that team should do in the first place. So they will rush to get the product defined. They'll say, where are those designs? Give me that product spec, give me those designs. And then they'll spend $1 million in 6 months to build that thing, only to discover that it's wrong. And so it's a very old concept. You can go look it up. It's called the cost of change. IDEO used to show this chart all the time, which is if you look at the life cycle of a project, the cost of change goes up massively, because it's a lot easier to define an idea than it is to actually build it and make it work. And so that investment just goes up exponentially. And so why would you not spend a little bit more time making sure you are building the right thing before you spend an enormous amount of money building the thing right?
Concept. I think that's such a critical thing. And for those who aren't aware, just the cost of change, that would be, the longer you spend building something, the more systems that you put in place, the more code you've written, the more dependencies you've built up. And so over time, going back and realizing, wait a second, that wasn't right. We need to fix it. Now costs exponentially amount of time, more time.
And money. Yeah.
And money. Yeah. Time and money to go back and update, fix all the dependencies, the variable, all these things,
Yeah.
And so that's that kind of concept. And was that something IDEO, did they kind of coin that term? Because I've heard that term too, but I didn't know if that was something in IDEO.
I don't think they coined it. I think IDEO coined or was ultimately the source of very little in the design world. But what they did extremely well was that they found important, useful, correct concepts. They made them core to their business, and they sold them and they presented them using design. And so I think they deserve a lot of credit and potentially critique with that for the things that they pushed and made common in the world. I think you look around now, and most good companies have a pile of great designers working for them, and I think IDEO can claim some portion of credit for that because they did a lot for the design world. IDEO and other like Frog and Continuum and those other big design consulting firms. I do want to say, by the way, just up front, and it's just to give you a preview on that main topic you brought up, there absolutely is a flip side to that, which is it's really hard to know that you're building the right thing until you've built it and tried to sell it. So there are the thing you run into as a designer, I think anybody entering the field should get ready for this, is you can do all the prototyping and testing in the world, and an executive will doubt that work, will doubt your evidence and your proof, as they should, because 50% of the time, the customers will not do what they said that they would do. Like, you will build the prototype, you will test it. They'll say, that's great, I'd love that, I'd love to buy that. And then you build it and launch it, and nobody buys it. But the trap I think people fall into is they go too far one side or the other. Like, getting that balance right is just crucial.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to dig more into that for sure. I want to talk a little bit first before we talk about the paradox, though, is this idea that, aesthetics actually do matter, though, right? We talk about, there's been all kinds of research done. There's been scholarly articles and papers published about the role of aesthetics, the halo effect going back to the 30s or 40s, the horns effect, which is sort of the opposite of the halo effect, right? The aesthetic usability effect, things like that. Obviously, aesthetics matter. Let's talk a little bit about this before we hop into the paradox of it, though. But this idea that aesthetics are actually important, from your perspective, and all the places you work, you've probably dealt with a lot of stakeholders, investors, CEOs, executives, customers, large and small. What's been your experience with this as far as aesthetics? And can you speak to a little bit about how much of a role that really does play into getting feedback?
I will say up front, like, we're going to eat the sundae in order, which is like, it's really aesthetics are the cherry on top. Don't get me wrong. Like, they absolutely are the cherry on top. If you've got two sundaes in front of you, are you going to choose the one that comes, they're exactly the same, except one has the cherry on top? Which one are you going to take? Which one are you going to buy? It matters. It matters a lot. And I think I've been through sort of a journey where, as an engineer, I was very focused on function, right? And then I went to IDEO, and there are a lot of people, IDEO gets this concept, and so they hired a lot of people who made very beautiful things. And so I kind of became a little enamored of that, and I really sort of drank the Kool-Aid. And then I went out into industry, and I saw how broken a lot of products were at much more fundamental levels. And I was famous briefly at Athena because I said, let's make sure we're not polishing a turd. And that is true. Like, you need to get the fundamentals right. But once you got the fundamentals right, you should absolutely care about aesthetics. And you should even perhaps care more about them in places like healthcare, which is typically so functionally focused and frankly so ugly, and yet could really benefit from some beauty. There was this designer at IDEO called, I can't remember his name, and I really wish I could, Elgin. Anyway, he had this beautiful presentation called Beauty Heals, which just really made this point. Like, if you want a beauty anywhere, wouldn't you want it in the place where you're trying to care for people and make them well? right? Like, and you go to hospitals and
Yeah.
they're kind of these awful looking places full of bad smells and wires and bad decor, and it's just all function. And yet, where else would you want a spa-like atmosphere that's like, beautiful and relaxing and all
Right.
this sort of thing? Anyway, to really hammer the main point, and you said it up front. There's that saying out there, which is, "Don't judge a book by its cover." That saying exists for a reason, which is that everybody judges books by the cover, right? This is true for your customers. So there's a reason why people like beautiful products and will gravitate towards them, even if honestly they're functionally worse. Sometimes the customers make a bad choice in that regard. But also, like, executives will gravitate towards that. Like, that trick works on everyone. It works on all of us. Actually, as a design leader, you have to often work really hard to override that. Like, two designers come to you. Imagine you had people working on competing concepts. Not an approach I normally take, but like, imagine you had that, and one person came to you with a beautiful concept with bad underlying UX, and one person came to you with an ugly concept, but like the right wireframes. You should choose the right wireframes and polish them up. But it's easy to get tricked into saying, "Oh, that one looks nice. Let's do that." But I think what's important is to get the fundamentals right, but then don't forget to do that polish at various points, like early when you're selling the idea internally, and later when you're actually launching it as well.
I like to compare it to wine bottles because that's pretty much how I buy
Yep.
my wine. I don't know a goddamn thing about wine. I know what tastes good, or to me at least. My palate isn't really that refined. But I go to the liquor store, I go to the wine shop or something. I'm looking for the labels, but the interesting thing, it's like the difference between a book and the reason why I like wine bottles over a book is it takes a long time to read a book, right? I mean, for most people, it takes me weeks, maybe longer. And I don't know if it's actually good until I've finished it. I've invested all this time, but I love the wine bottle analogy because I can tell first sip, this is trash, this is good, this is bad, And so, like, in that case, it's just sort of like immediate reaction, which is, I think, more similar to how most people deal with applications, right? If I get a really bad app and I don't like it in the first 15 minutes, what's the chances I'm coming back, versus a book, which I like, well, let me finish reading it, or maybe people will stop halfway through. But you're investing a good amount of time. But the wine bottle analogy for me, I like, is because it's more that instant kind of appeal one way or another, and it doesn't matter how beautiful the wine bottle is after that. If I think the wine's terrible, I'm not coming back. I'm not going to buy it. But if regardless of how nice the label is, if it's mediocre, and my palate is not so refined, but it takes a lot for me to think a bottle of wine is bad. Yeah, so this idea of aesthetics, it is interesting. You mentioned this, and I think this is really important. Like, that saying, "Don't judge a book by its cover," exists because people judge books by their covers, and I think that's something really important for us to remember.
Yeah, and as a designer in a company, you are the only person with the ability to turn that dial. Like, usually, I mean, I've worked with some amazing engineers who happen to have a good eye, but like, on average, nobody else is going to advocate for that. Nobody else is going to have the skills to do that, and very few people are going to really be able to judge that effectively. And so you kind of have a responsibility to get that right as well, atop making sure that you're building the right thing in the first place.
So when we think about this paradox, this balancing act between the two, the good on one side, the good design on one side, the good usability on the other side, and not making sure we're not polishing the turds, where does a designer start? How does that, from your perspective, is there a method? Is there a process? What do you focus on first? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I would imagine you focus on the functionality before polishing it, but which is why we always say go low fidelity first. But I'm curious from your perspective, thinking about this, if you're, you've got a team of young designers, what does Scott tell them? How does Scott get them to kind of focus on the right stuff? Where do you start?
Research. I mean, this is the bread and butter, right? But I can't overstate it. Research. Internal. So the way IDEO used to do this, and I think it's a good model, although we can talk about whether you get this luxury in-house, is we would spend 2 weeks on internal research. That meant talking to the client, like suck up everything that they know. And that is still true. And in fact, it's a really important step in the process, is to give your stakeholders the opportunity to share all the things they know. Because guaranteed, they know a lot more about this problem than you're ever going to know. Like, the sales team has spent 2 years talking to customers let's say they joined the company 2 years. They've spent 2 years talking to customers, hearing them complain, hearing what they need. They've been out, they've visited them, all this sort of stuff. Like, they have a lot more knowledge in their head than you're ever going to get from a few UX research sessions. So start with them, extract all the knowledge you can from all the people across the company. Then go talk to the users. And it's good to do that afterwards because you get you've got up the learning curve a little bit. You don't ask as many dumb questions. And importantly, your stakeholders also feel like you've listened to them, you've valued their input, you're making use of it, you're going to protect the time of their customers, all those sorts of things. And then you go talk to them. And again, it's good to be pretty explicit about the difference between generative research, which is I'm going to understand the user writ large, and that's going to allow me to, at a deeper level, inspect all of the assumptions that were thrown at me when I was briefed on this project. So he said, hey, can you go, we've got this problem. Can you go like redesign that page? Well, when you go to the users, don't just go show them alternative pages. Like, you want to understand the context of their workflow. Like, where does that page exist and what are all the other things? So it might turn out that like that whole page shouldn't exist. You should have 2 different pages, or a totally different product, or actually it should be a phone call from somebody. Because honestly, it's just not appropriate to be a digital thing because of these complexities. So like, question every assumption that was thrown at you, including from those salespeople and those customer service staff that you spoke to in-house. Because, at that point, you can make sure you're designing the right thing. Then after that, that's where you go back. You do the wireframes. Again, test those internally. Those internal staff, the PMs, the engineers, like the sales staff, the customer service staff, like they are, again, your best first port of call, but do take things that they say with a grain of sand because they are anchored with what the company's doing right now. And then, but they might point out really obvious things that make total sense, and then go back out to the users again. And you can do that. I would say there's like in that phase, especially that internal research, like, it's even better than going to them early with those wireframes. It's like designing the wireframes with them. Don't be scared to do that. Like, have an opinion.
Yes.
Be the designer.
Along.
Be in control of that process, but invite everybody in. There's a difference between letting your PM tell you what the wireframe should be, and on the other end, there's like, I'm not going to show my PM until I'm certain of my wireframes. And then in the middle is like, get together and work through it with them, right? Then they feel involved, they feel engaged. Absolutely. You're on the same team rather than, here's my idea, do you like it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love about all those collaborative tools. I do co-design all the time. In fact, I've kind of gotten to the point now, although my job, I'm not really a product designer anymore. I'm more like service design. So it's kind of, more high level, less wireframes and less pixel perfection. But I will get into Miro, and they've just released a new, well, maybe not recently, but anyway, a wireframing kit, like in Miro. So you can pull up a thing and kind of create a, very, very rough, very low fidelity wireframe. And I actually just did this a couple of weeks ago with some stakeholders in a workshop. And it's amazing being able to do that. And, we talk again, like all these psychology concepts, that idea, like the IKEA effect, right? Where when you help build something, you tend to get more buy-in. And when it's your thing that you've helped create, you get less pushback in the end from these people because they've been a part of it from the beginning. So imagine going, this working in a silo, coming in and being like, hey, here's a thing. You don't have as much of the problem with that aesthetic usability effect and with the halo effect because it's their thing too. Everybody loves their baby regardless of how pretty it is, right? So
yeah. Instead of you showing it with a bunch of foreign, ugly wireframes, it's like, yeah, that's that thing we designed together, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and those collaborative tools, which is beautiful thing with Figma, being able to hop in a browser and anybody can log in. FigJam, Figma, Miro, Mural, whatever tool you want to use. These are huge opportunities for designers. It's not just to collaborate with other designers. It's to collaborate with those stakeholders. And I love that concept of the co-design. I would encourage everybody to do that. Get out of your silo, get together, design together. You're just going to have such an easier time selling ideas when, those people think it's their idea. Like, take ego out of this. It doesn't need to be your idea. Let them think it's their idea, and you'll never have a problem selling it. I promise.
100%. Yeah. 100%. The other thing I would say on that front, by the way, just because we're talking about wireframing tools, I think 2 amazing things have happened in the last 5 years with design. One is the rise of tools like Figma, which are really pretty powerful in terms of how quickly they enable you to do things. And AI is going to make this even stronger, right? Like it's going to put together options for you and all this shit. And a foundation for that has been design systems, which, you get these ready-made components in your design system library in Figma. But there's a little bit of a trap there, and I think we all fall into it. I have personally definitely fallen into it at times, which is it's almost easier to put together a mock-up using those components than it is to wireframe. But the result is that you end up focusing on the wrong things at the wrong time, right? Like it's, those tools are so powerful and so great for creating production design and for dev handoff and consistency and all the rest of it. But it does create this trap that you can fall into of going hi-fi too early. And I think I personally am looking now for ways to enforce is maybe the wrong word, but like naturally lead teams towards low fidelity prototyping so that they focus on the right things. Flip side of that doesn't mean that in points of time you can't drop in and make like a hi-fi, beautiful, appealing version of your current thinking, but do your thinking in wires.
And so the interesting thing about the aesthetic usability effect, right? The research shows not that aesthetics are better, it's that aesthetics cover up the underlying issues often. And so the problem with doing testing or studies with high fidelity is when someone sees it, they focus on the beautiful part of it and they ignore the underlying usability issues. And so it's not just saying like pretty is better, it's saying pretty covers up problems. And so if you're going to have problems in production, it should be pretty to cover up the problems. But when you're at the phase, which it shouldn't, well, I say that, it shouldn't be that way, but that's a benefit, I guess, of it. But when you're doing those usability studies and you're trying to get feedback, showing it in high fidelity is actually doing you a disservice because you are masking a lot of those usable problems, because people will see a beautiful interface and they will tend to, according to the research, they'll tend to like it over something that may work not as well or may work better, but looks uglier. So, that's something, it's like people think, well, I can do it pretty. Why wouldn't I just do it pretty? It's like you're doing it ugly because there's a benefit to finding those problems early so that you're not polishing the turd, later on. So anyway, it's just kind of an interesting thing. A lot of people, I think, kind of misunderstand that idea of aesthetic usability effect. And really it's meant to say, that covers the problems up. So anyway, I don't know. That's just kind of something I wanted to call out.
That's a great way of framing it. Totally agree. And like, it's the same thing. Like when you're trying to sell an idea internally, you want to cover up those problems. When you're trying to sell a product externally, you want to cover up those problems. When you want feedback internally or you want feedback externally, be very thoughtful on your internal meetings about, is this a feedback meeting or a selling meeting? Or is it a little bit of both? Maybe I show like some hot hi-fi up front to get people excited, and then I go back to wires to get feedback, or vice versa. You can be strategic about that.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned something a second ago. I just want to kind of go back to it because I think this is also something worth diving into a second. You mentioned start with research. Research is important. You also mentioned something, when you ask them on something a certain way, they'll often tell you what they think you want to hear. Humans, we tend to lie, not because we're malicious, but because we don't want to offend, we don't want to discourage, we don't want to, put down someone's ideas, especially when we think it's your idea, right? So that idea of research, but also people, not always being completely honest and upfront. And one thing I just want to kind of call out is this idea that doing research is very important, but you've got to understand how to do research correctly and have the right people with the right skills doing the right research so that the decisions that you're making in the future are not based on bad data. It's based on good data. So when you get that bad data, you're going in and you're designing a thing. Oh, we're doing the right stuff. You're doing the right stuff. You build it, you ship it, and no one uses it because the data was bad to begin with. So I'm curious from your perspective. I wanted to talk a little bit about that idea of research, kind of circling back to that, and how, there's obviously, this some pros and cons. I think most people depends who you talk to, would hate this idea of democratizing research. They point out the fact that doing research isn't valuable if you're not doing it correctly, which I think is absolutely true. Could you talk a little bit about that idea though of like research and the value of right research and your experience dealing with people who are doing wrong research? I'm sure you've run into that a lot.
Yeah. So here's a question that I would pose to anybody who has a strong opinion about this, especially people who've been in the industry for a long time and have come from one side or the other of this problem. Is bad research worse than no research? And I think the answer is all in the interpretation. Or rather, intelligent interpretation can ensure that bad research is still always better than no research. It's like generally more research is good. Like apart from like the resource allocation problem, like are you going to spend your dollars and time on research or on making stuff? Obviously there's an optimum there. But I would say in general, I would much rather have a lot of people out there talking to customers and understanding customers than less of that. However, the caveat on that is you have to know how to interpret it and how to use it, right? So you need to know the limitations of the research that was done. Like if you go watch an interview that somebody did and they're asking a whole bunch of leading questions, you're probably going to throw out most of what you hear, but you'll still learn some things from it, right? So the question is who's interpreting the research and how smart are they at being able to interpret it, right? Like I would argue that no interpretation is better than bad interpretation, but bad research is better than no research. So the other thing I would say is that the problem I brought up before, like customers are always optimistic about your products. There are different types of research you can do that tend to be more accurate and realistic. Like you go talk to somebody in person and show them a concept. Some people will, if you're really off, they'll tell you, yeah, I'm not this product's wrong. And some people will be more blunt with you, even if like they like the concept, but there's this problem, or like I like it, but I wouldn't pay for it. But you can get more people to be more honest with you by doing different types of research. I think willingness to pay research is a great one. Like how much would you actually pay for this? It's still living in hypothetical land though, right? And so one of the things I've come to realize is that there's a lot of executives out there as well in product world who will say, sell it first. Like don't build anything until you've sold it, which is kind of crazy, right? Like it's a little bit backwards and it feels like you're kind of playing a trick on your customers. But there's real logic behind that, which is until somebody has actually signed on the dotted line, I'm not going to believe that there's a market for this thing. I think where the tech world gets into trouble sometimes is that they think you have to build it before you sell it. And so, and by the way, this is like, get ready for the circular problem here, because so that's why there's these execs out there that are like, I'm not going to allocate resources to building something until we have sold it at least once, if not twice or three times to different customers. Because then you end up in a situation where you are rushing to actually build it. And then there's no time to get those details right. And in fact, you end up building the wrong product. So it's one of these, like, that's the true, like, that's some of the true details of that paradox. Is like, you can do some research, you can start to build confidence, you can start to understand what you should build. You can then put together a value prop and you can sell it, but then you have to rush to get it out the door to the customer. And so I think every company I've worked at has tried to get the balance right between those things, and different people are advocates, stronger or weaker advocates for different parts of that challenge or that balance.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that. There's concepts like something like in research, at least the Wizard of Oz approach, where you can have a thing functioning like, I don't know, an AI tool, for instance, but it's actually a human in the background pretending to be the AI just to gauge whether or not it works. But then there's also feature fakes, or something you could put on your website where a button to a feature that doesn't exist yet. Yeah. And then you can say, here, sign up to be notified when it's done, and you can gauge interest that way.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely ways to do that. It's just you got to get kind of creative with it. And I don't know, that kind of stuff is actually really, really interesting. The other thing that I was going to talk about, there's something that Jared Spool says quite a bit when he's talking about research, and this sort of, the idea is that like you can get feedback from various people, and you can guess. It's just a matter of knowing how much, what's the risk of guessing here? It's like one of those, like to your point, going back and saying like, all right, we've got feedback from a stakeholder. A stakeholder did an interview, or a stakeholder talked to a customer, right? And Ari Zalmanah, he's posted about this quite a bit as well. And I love the concept, but it's, you don't have to dismiss research from someone who was not a quote unquote researcher. You just have to know what to do with it, right? And so you take that into account and you say, all right, well, we heard from several salespeople that customers don't like this. the chances are very good that multiple salespeople hearing the same thing from multiple different customers, that's probably something you could take back into consideration, you know?
Maybe you want to go out, maybe you want to say, okay, I believe the customers are saying that they don't like this thing, which is perhaps surprising. Well, so go ask the customers why, right? Like go understand that. And it might be that it's still the right thing to build, but you have to solve this one crucial problem within it, or else it's going to flop. Like customers don't like it because they foresee this issue with it. But if you can solve that issue, then it's actually a good thing. But like, yeah, guaranteed, yeah, customers saying they don't like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing, like I was mentioning Jared Spool, one of the big things that he talks about is this idea of, take it to people as a gut check. Like we're hearing this, we think this is what we think. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I like to think about is like, well, what's the risk of being wrong? Like if we're taking a guess and we know we're guessing, and I'm not necessarily I'm doing secondary research based on stuff I've heard other people say. Is there a lot of risk? Maybe not.
So you're reminding me of something. So I've been chatting this week with a designer I work with, a great guy called Chris Giussano. He's at Spotify now. And he was renowned at Athena for doing what he called drive-by research, which is he would just pick up his laptop, and this was easier in pre-COVID times. You can still do it on Zoom. And he would walk around the office, and he would find people, and he would do them his early design work, right? Like, to just get that research. So yeah, do the drive-bys. And you can do those drive-bys with, if you're lucky and you've got easy access to customers, then you can do drive-bys with customers as well. I've always been a fan of like customer panels, like people that you build up. You don't want to become captive to certain users, right? And overly steered by them. But having a panel that you can ping frequently of people who are engaged and know how it works and are ready to give you feedback, that's great. And if you have them inside the business, even better.
Now, you mentioned something too earlier in the conversation, and you specifically called out how IDEO didn't have this problem, but maybe internal teams would. It's this idea that, I trust IDEO. I'm paying them a lot of money. They're experts. I'm bringing them in. I'm going to let them do whatever they want. But when you're an internal team, you often don't have that luxury, even though it's funny because you probably know more about it than those consultants that are coming in, right?
Yeah.
But, you're not trusted there. And so, it's interesting because I work at GE Aerospace, big, giant, global conglomerate, right? Or I guess we're not a conglomerate, we're a big, giant corporation. And I find it that often, because the company is so big, you often don't know people. And so they don't trust you. Even if you are an internal employee, you could have the same badge and everything, but they've never met you before and they don't trust you, but they trust other people. And when you're going out, I feel like one of these things that I think is just so important when we talk about doing all this research is this idea of internal networking and going out and being able to meet people and have them introduce you to a sales guy or a customer support person or whatever it is. And you'd be surprised how that warm introduction versus a warm email versus a cold email, cold call, works so much better. And you might be surprised how easy it is to actually just slip into those meetings. And if you can just network and find somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody, and you just kind of wiggle your way into those relationships. That's something that I found working in these big giant corporations. You don't have the benefit of being that outside consultant that is seen as the expert. So you've got to kind of make your own connections.
That is, I've talked about this with colleagues a lot, and I think there are two major effects with the consulting firm, that credibility. One is rational, which is that they've been through a selling process. They probably got a warm referral in from some peer of this leader with the budget that's going to pay for the consulting company, and they said, "Oh, I hear these guys are really good. They did great work for my buddy who works at this other company." And then they turn up and they sell. They sell hard against 3 or 4 other people and 3 or 4 other companies, and the company buys at that point. They're like, we chose these people. We're putting down several $100,000 for these people to do this work. And so yeah, they're really committed. The other thing that's going on is frustrating, and I see it in all walks of life, which is the unknown. It's weird how people are optimistic about novel people, right? They're like, this person that I know that I've been working with for years, I know all of their strengths and all of their flaws. Right. This person out here that I've never worked with, my assumption is they're amazing until they show me their idiot.
Yeah, especially if they get a referral. Yeah, that's so funny.
Right? So novel is shiny, and you see that that play out in lots of different walks of business life, basically. Like it's like, the novel project is shiny to the executives as well. So there's two problems going on there. But I think your point is really good about the internal networks. And again, I was talking to somebody this morning about that like once you've been at a company for a long time, you know all the people. You can get those referrals. You know who to go talk to. You've built a relationship with them. But when you're going in, either you're new to the company or you're going into a new part of your own company, you still have to sell. Like, don't assume that you can just walk in the door and be trusted. You have to sell yourself, your skills, your passion. In theory, it's the easiest customer you're going to find, right? Because you're all on the same team. You're all trying to get your company to succeed, do great things for your customers, increase your share price, however you want to frame it. So they should be fertile ground for that relationship, but you still have to sell.
But I love that idea, though, the shiny. There's got to be a name for this bias. I'm sure someone's done research about this. The shiny new object, the new toy, or whatever. But take advantage of that. If you are, knowing that that's how people act, take advantage of that, and then this leads into my next question: is the value of one versus the other, the value of the polished thing versus the value of the raw, unfiltered, testable thing. When you've junior designers, especially younger designers, they don't have that power. They don't have that influence often. How does a team, an individual contributor, talk about the value of one versus the other to some stakeholder, some person who has more authority, who may want the shiny, polished thing?
Yeah, that's tricky because I think typically the more senior somebody is, the more they're focused on results. So they want the end thing. They want they're thinking about, how is my customer going to react to this? The one thing that I have seen fly on that front, on average, most people in a business don't want process for the sake of process, right? If you go in there and you say, well, we went through this great process to design this product, that'll build some credibility. But if you don't get it right, often it'll actually have the opposite effect. You'll have people say, God, these designers wasted a lot of time on this thing. Couldn't they have just done it?
And that's often the critique with a lot of research, especially research teams are seen as the ones who take forever and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So the flip that I've seen work sometimes is we worked with our customers. Our customers loved this process. They really enjoyed the research sessions and they felt heard and listened to and all that sort of stuff. Now, the issue there is that you're only talking to 0.1% of your customer base, right? But if you can use that to say, this was a process that was really satisfying for everybody, and then it's an argument to get access to more customers, right? Sometimes sales teams are pretty cagey about access to customers. And so if you can make it actually a selling point, it's a way to build the relationship with the customer, not risk it. And then you can publicize that process and say to all your other customers, this was developed in partnership with people just like you. I've seen that play better both externally and also with the internal teams and with leadership, right? That this process is valuable in and of itself, as well as leading to a better product.
Yeah. So any other final closing thoughts about this idea of balancing the two? Don't waste time polishing junk, but make sure that it's pretty enough to get the right feedback, or make sure it's pretty enough so that we can sell it. Any other closing advice? Any thoughts there that we didn't get a chance to chat about today?
No, I just would say be explicit about it, and with your inner circle, be honest about it as well. I was working at a place. It was very sort of functionally focused. Healthcare, great team. The leader before me had been pretty sort of rigorous and by the book. For example, was somebody who believed that researchers should, at that time at least, maybe their opinions have changed since then, but it was researchers should do research. They should never design anything because they'll get attached to it and they won't be able to test it. Designers should design. They should never do research because they'll be biased if they do the research themselves. Never the two shall mix. Like I say, they may have changed their opinion, maybe not. I don't know. I can see the arguments. Anyway, so this organization was pretty very functional design focused. And then we acquired a company, and this designer, amazing guy, Michael Havel, he's a fellow Kiwi, still based in New Zealand. He came in and he totally understood this thing that aesthetics sell. In fact, I credit him with sort of my continued journey on how I feel about aesthetics. And he was like, "Oh man, you've got to make this if you want stuff to fly inside a big company where there's 1,000 ideas competing for resources, it better look amazing. And like you can, and it's like a secret weapon for designers as well. Designers always forget, I think, that, okay, it's just aesthetics, but like nobody else can pull that lever. It's the same as well with just visual thinking. Like a diagram's worth 1,000 words and is amazing for aligning teams. But your average engineer or product manager, maybe they'll make like an architecture diagram occasionally. How often are they going to make a diagram of the way that users think and how the product interacts with them? Like, that's a designer's job. You can do that and you can be the hero of the team because you aligned everybody around the similar understanding of the way the market works by using a diagram.
This is something we talked a little bit about a couple weeks back, and I wasn't sure we'd have enough time. I actually want to dig into this a little bit more, so let's forget the closing thing. I was about to close us out. I actually want to dig into this a little bit more because when we talk about the value of aesthetics, right, we're talking about not just application software design. We're talking about presentation. We're talking about presentation decks. We're talking about, the way we style, emails, maybe the way we draw diagrams, the way we do all these things. And that value, again, like thinking back to this idea of aesthetics, don't judge a book by its cover, good aesthetics sell. When you've got an idea and you've got something that you want to try to sell to your team, there are, okay ways to present it in an email, just text-based on a PowerPoint deck, black and white, or you could polish it up and sell that idea to the team. And I think you just mentioned this is like our superpower. This is something a product manager has never really, well, maybe they would. Most product managers wouldn't be able to do this. Most engineers most likely wouldn't be able to do this. Lean into that. And you'd be surprised at how much you can influence your team when you do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, often those diagrams become sort of touchstones for a team, and they become the way that they talk about things. And it's a pretty subtle effect. The other one that I'm renowned for is, again, this is pre-COVID thing, and I missed it a little bit, which is I always had the whiteboard pen in my hand, right? Like if you're having a meeting and everybody's talking back and forth and you're arguing about this, and then you go up and
let me draw this out.
Yeah, and you go and you put a whiteboard diagram, suddenly the conversation's about that diagram on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
Right? Like you wield, the pen is mightier than the sword. And you draw that diagram on the board, and wow, what a way to have influence. So I'm looking for ways to bring whiteboarding back into Zoom world, and not just for selfish reasons. I need to hook up an iPad, I think.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, I am on Miro all the time in meetings. I will just share my screen, like, let me throw this up here, and I'll, blank whiteboard, just totally blank, brand new Miro board. And I'll just start from scratch and start sticky noting and diagramming and drawing shapes and squiggles or whatever I need to do. And you're right. I mean, that idea, though, of like using that visual, tying it back to the topic, though, right? Again, like that idea of this is important. It sells. Lean into that. Don't start talking about stuff. Use the visuals, even if they're just ugly black and white squares on a whiteboard. That visual piece, like you said, is worth so much more than just a bunch of people talking across each other who might actually be saying the same thing. A lot of times they're saying the same thing and they just keep going back and forth.
That's exactly what I was about to say. And there's a guy at IDEO, one of the earliest employees. He's still there, Danny Boyle, amazing engineer and just all around great guy. Anyway, he's oft quoted with an IDEO for his saying, which is never show up to a meeting without a prototype. And he's just generally an advocate for prototypes because prototypes are great for getting external feedback. But the other thing that they do is they align understanding within a company. There's those cartoons out there, I'm sure you've seen them, where it's like, there's three people all talking about the same concept, but then there's the little thought bubble and they've all got a different picture in their head. And it's not until you actually put the diagram on the whiteboard or you make the prototype that you realize, oh, I wasn't thinking about it that way. I was thinking about it this way. And so bringing those things to life suddenly allows everybody to see the same understanding and argue about the differences and, refine that model or that understanding in their head.
Well, no, the other thing too I'm thinking about is that people are more likely to remember a picture. They're more likely to remember even a diagram. And I can't tell you, we've run into this on my team, and my director, UX director, has actually done a really great job of this recently. It's like, stop talking about the stuff and just put it in a PowerPoint deck. Put it in a PowerPoint deck, and we will share it, and we'll share it over and over and over and over. We'll share it as many times as we have to get the point across because saying it in meetings doesn't work as well as showing them even in just an ugly PowerPoint deck, but again, make it pretty. It's worth even more. But that idea of just like getting something to look at and share and leave behind, a PDF I can send you, something like that. It's amazing how much quicker all those people get it.
Well, that's another. Now you're taking me into another one, which is the whole thing of you have to, in a large organization, you have to say something 7 times before people really hear it, right? And you probably have to show a diagram 3 times
show them
before
3
they
times.
really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but you're totally right. That people are visual. Like, there are very few people in this world that actually grok things quicker through text than through diagrams. Yeah, it's a superpower. So use it. I do want to say, as we wrap this up, by the way, we've talked through all of this theory. It's really hard to actually do all of these things all the time. So if there's any young designer out there who's gobbling up all of this theory and maybe this podcast amongst it, don't be too hard on yourself. Like, we all fail to do this stuff as much as we believe we should. We all get caught up and fall into the traps and don't operate as effectively as we should be able to, given all of the maxims that we have in our heads. But yeah, it's self-reinforcement to talk about it.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I think is worth calling out, and this again ties back into this idea of visual sell, right, and all that stuff. But I've got a colleague that is amazing at this. He will take these mural boards, ugly, black and white, whatever, and he will just take he'll go to I got to find out what the URL that he goes to, but he uses this AI illustration generator. It's not Dolly. It's like something else, but it's all the same kind of visual language. It's those kind of flowy illustrations of people that you see on a lot of websites and stuff.
Oh, I need this. Somebody was asking for this on a forum that I'm on yesterday.
Right, I'll find out what it is. I'll ping it. I'll put it in the show notes. But he'll take those ugly mural boards and throw those illustrations on it. If it's like a process talking about a thing, he'll be like, the user's entering blah, blah, blah. Or, we work in GE Aerospace with jet engines. And he'll be like, this mechanical engineer is doing a thing with the jet engine. And he'll find an illustration and put that in there. And that stuff people remember those things and they remember those visuals. Even if you could have gotten the point across without it, it's just that little bit of, taking that, and again, the topic today, balancing that sort of that ugly black and white thing with the beautiful thing and having that sell. You could put those things together and apply it to many things, not just your interface design. And it just works so well, and again, I mean, AI, you could take a bunch of facts, plug them into ChatGPT and say, write a problem and benefit statement. I mean, and then you can use that to talk about it. You probably don't want to copy and paste. You want to tweak it, I'm sure. But you can use those new AI tools to help you, to make this easier on yourself if you feel like you're not good on it. Be aware, obviously, sometimes the AI stuff doesn't always give you the right results.
Well, yeah, but you'll need to edit the AI thing, but the time you save, because it gets you past the blank page and you just have to tweak it, put that time into making a diagram of it, right? Look to go with it. Add the visual thing as well as the text. Your LLM will do your text for you, and you can just polish it up, and then spend your time on the diagram instead, and it'll be 3 times as compelling.
Absolutely. All right. I love it. Well, Scott, this is an awesome conversation. We could probably talk about the visual explanation piece. Could be like a whole episode on its own, but I think all of that kind of ties back together with this idea of finding that balance between the ugly thing to test and the beautiful thing to sell. It's certainly not easy, as you said. This is something I think most people, 20 years in, I've been doing this for, God, I don't know how long. I still am not great at it, and I still fall for those traps of making this thing look beautiful. I was just thinking, somebody out there listening, build this thing, but what if you had a design system in something like Figma, and you could have 2 variations of every component, a wireframe and a pretty version, and the final version, and you could just flip a switch, change a variable somewhere, boom, you output your ugly wireframe, black and white, to something, to the high fidelity without any extra effort.
I mean, it's hilarious. That's what we did in my last job.
Yeah.
Another great designer, Hunter, he'd use the design system to make the thing, and then he'd desaturate the whole thing to make it black and white.
Smart. Yeah.
I guess there's a way to, but I totally agree. And I think it was Sketch used to have a styling that was sort of looked like hand-drawn sketches and things like that. But yeah, I think, honestly, I think that's if a design team wanted to do a design systems team wanted to do something useful for all their designers, it would be to have that. I totally agree. It should be more of a thing.
We'll talk offline. We'll see if we can get some investors or something.
Yeah, sounds good. How many ideas have we had?
Lots. I got lots. Oh man, if I followed through on like 1% of the crap I talked with people about, I'd be a rich man.
Indeed.
All right, Scott. Awesome, man. Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I think we could talk at length about some of this stuff even more. Maybe we'll have you back on to talk more about this idea that visual explanation piece is super powerful for designers, because I think that is something we don't lean into enough. I think we could definitely do it more. So before we get out of here, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, LinkedIn, all that stuff? Where can they go and find more about you and listen and learn from you?
So I am on LinkedIn. I have just built myself a website, which I hadn't had for years. So hopefully by the time this comes out, I'll actually have it published to scottmackie.com. And on there, I'll link to Medium. I have a couple of articles on Medium from years ago, but I've got actually, in prepping for this to talk to you a little bit, I was thinking through some things, and I am going to get those published on Medium as well. Yeah, there'll be a sort of a written, concise, but I don't know, blurb on these topics. But yeah, you can check me out there. You can check me out on LinkedIn, and feel free to get in touch.
Right on. Yeah, and let me know when that's ready. We'll definitely put that in the show notes. And I got a little sneak peek at some of your Medium articles, and they're definitely good stuff. I can't wait to share that. All right, Scott. So before we get out of here, I've got a few questions that I'd like to ask all of my guests to help our listeners out there get to know all of our guests just a little bit better. You got some time to stick around here and answer some silly little questions. Sure. All right. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
So I am. This is probably divisive. I've heard it's divisive, but most people love Tolkien, and I certainly was into that as an adolescent. And I'm reading it to my kids right now, which is really fun. A more unique one that I read many years ago and really enjoyed and continue to think of as one of my favorite books is this book called Passage to Genoa, which is just a story of a guy who's it's a random book, and I don't know why I liked it so much, but it's just a guy who's going through a tough time with his wife, and I think it's autobiographical. I think it's real, and he basically gets on a boat in a yacht in Vancouver and sails up to Alaska, and he just talks about his experience of sailing that trip, but also the history of the area, which is pretty fascinating. And it's just beautifully written.
That's cool. If everybody had the time and money to just go on a yacht cruise with their wife to like help fix their marriage.
But he's not with his wife. He's taking time away.
No, even yeah. If everybody had time to, Jesus.
Like, you two work out.
Doesn't. Oh, that's
I
good.
can't remember. It's not really. It just adds emotional angst to the book, but mostly I enjoyed the descriptions of beauty and of
awesome.
the area and the history.
I love it. Yeah, hopefully they didn't have like kids. He's leaving his wife. It's like, I'm going to go find myself. Just watch the kids for a month or two. Maybe they were all grown, but I just...
I can't remember. I've got to get back and read it. I'll probably, having publicly pronounced it as a favorite book, I'll probably discover that now.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I mean, I love that kind of stuff too. It kind of reminds me of, stuff like On the Road or Motorcycle Diaries and things like that.
Yep.
All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast?
I mean, again, this is a little boring, but This American Life. It's just, it's great. It's just the pinnacle. And specifically, if anybody has not heard the Squirrel Cop episode of This American Life,
Squirrel Cop? I don't think I've heard that one.
Oh, just Google it. Squirrel Cop, This American Life. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Yeah. I love This American Life. That one and Radiolab are two of my favorites. Just like what they do with audio and like how they tell a story. It's just with clips of people. Anyway, I love.
The other one that my wife's much better at finding podcasts for us, and she likes The Moth, which is probably well known as well. And there's a couple of episodes from that one that was for like the best of The Moth, and it has this great one about. It's just really quirky, but somehow super engaging about the Kennedy family. This family that in Massachusetts that loves the Kennedy family, and sort of like gossipy spies on them. And Cape Cod. This is a story, but like back in the '60s. That one's great. And then in that same compilation episode is one from a fishing charter captain about going fishing and the motor breaks down. And anyway, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Ira Glass, actually, for those who don't know, host of This American Life. He actually inspired me a little bit. During COVID, there was a picture of him hunched over in his closet recording the podcast. And I was just like, I got an idea. Actually, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm in my closet right now. I'm actually like, this is my suits right here.
Nice.
If you can see. Anyway, I'm actually in my closet. That picture of Ira Glass like inspired me when like, I got a closet. I could record in the closet because I had nowhere to record.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, I could do that in here. Anyway, Ira inspired me. Ira, if you're listening, thanks.
Yeah.
Because it sounds great. The audio, the acoustics, all the clothes really help with the acoustics in this room.
There was a great, I can't remember the details, but there was a great episode like a few months back where he was talking about his early days as, maybe there's two. Anyway, he's like, there's some good Ira Glass history out there. He's, pretty amazing dude.
Yeah, he's fascinating. I love his voice too. I could listen to him. Like he could just put me to sleep. I could just have him like read every audiobook. I would listen to way more audiobooks.
Have you seen Fred Armisen do his Ira Glass impression on SNL?
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, you got to look it up.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do maybe that'll be the outro for the show today. I'll get Fred Armisen. Oh, that's hilarious. I love that. All right. I'm gonna go do that as soon as I get off here. All right. What is your favorite meal?
Yeah, so my favorite meal is fresh fish caught with my father in our home harbor, brought back and had off the barbecue with a salad that my mother has made, because she somehow, everybody in my family agrees, she somehow has this magic. In fact, my in-laws agree that she just makes these magical
that's
salads.
saying something right there.
Yeah, like she just somehow, makes these interesting, delicious salads, often with produce from their garden. And so, when I get back home to New Zealand, which is, I'm fortunate to go once a year, which is a lot, but not enough. But yeah, that's my favorite meal.
All right, 2 follow-up questions. What type of fish is your favorite?
So fish? we mostly catch snapper, or rather my father. I say my father does all the work. He knows what spotters, he owns the boat. I think we reel one in. But red snapper. But sometimes we get, if we're lucky, we get what's called a trevally or a terek. And then occasionally we'd get kingfish, but they're not normally big enough, which is kind of like a tuna, a small tuna, skipjack.
Okay, I've never heard of that before. All right, second follow-up question. What type of salad? Like, what does your mom do that? So I guess I don't want to give away any secrets, but what is it about? Like, is there a special ingredient? Is it just like the she makes her own salad dressing? Like, what is it that she does? I
don't know.
Or maybe it's just that's the beauty of it. You just don't know what it is.
It's just like it always has really fresh ingredients, just like perfect lettuce that like she like spins the lettuce and then pats it dry so that the dressing will actually stick to it. She gets the amount of dressing just right. Like everything's cut up perfectly. There's avocados, there's cherry tomatoes, there's cherry peppers. Often there's some interesting ingredient in there that she gets right. And I don't know. Nobody can explain it, but everybody agrees.
Okay.
I think I like a specific. Every now and then she will make like a specifically different salad that's like out of a recipe book and has some strange combination of things in it. But you can just say general salads are just better.
I love it. So you mentioned red snapper. I grew up in New Orleans, and red snapper you can get in the Gulf of Mexico. So you can get red snapper down there, and it's not cheap. But every once in a while, I would have friends that would go deep sea fishing, and they would come back with just like pounds and pounds of snapper. And they're like, you want some? I'm like, yes, give it to me. It's like $20, $30 a pound sometimes, depending on where you went. But red snapper, now I'm in Cincinnati, landlocked Ohio. And I'm just like, God, I miss, and all the fish, everybody likes perch and all this stuff. And I was like, back in New Orleans, we'd throw the perch away. That was like trash.
Perch? Who eats perch?
I was like, you guys eat perch? You eat that stuff? Oh man, I miss red snapper. That's red like just a pan seared red snapper.
Just in butter.
God, it's so good.
And with salt and pepper.
Oh god, yeah. Oh, it's so good. You don't even need anything. Yeah, but did you guys do it on the Barbie?
On the Barbie.
Like
right on the Barbie.
On the Barbie.
Okay. And the best thing is that like it was swimming 2 hours before you're eating it.
It's so fresh. Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right, what is your favorite vacation spot?
Well, so it's hard because I go back to New Zealand and all my family and friends are there. Well, not all my friends. I have friends here as well, but a lot of old friends are there.
Your old friends, yeah.
And so New Zealand's obviously great. And then the other place is Italy. So my wife was born in Italy
Oh,
because
cool.
her father is a scholar of Italian literature. And
all right.
and she spent a lot of her childhood summers in Italy. And so we just love Italy. I mean, it's good food, good wine, and usually good friends as well while we're there. So
that's awesome. I love that. I haven't been to Italy. I haven't been to Australia. I haven't been to New Zealand. I haven't been anywhere.
No, you got to go to the
places. I need to go.
The other thing that's funny is if you take New Zealand and you turn it upside down, it's either the UK, like the same sort of shape, or it's Italy. Obviously, it's like New Zealand's surrounded by a lot of ocean, whereas Britain's further north, kind of near the landmass, so the weather's a little bit worse. Italy's further south, has the Mediterranean, so the weather's a little bit better. But they're both pretty similar in their shape and size, and they both have a range of mountains running down part of them. And you got these skinny, narrow countries.
Yeah, I love it. I get. Was it what movie? Is it Lord of the Rings? They filmed in New Zealand.
Oh yeah.
And it just like all those. I mean, it just looks so beautiful. I don't know, just like all of the just the mountains and the streams and the rivers. Oh, it's just
some of that CGI, but not much of it actually. So yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, I thought most of it was otherwise. Like, why go to New Zealand? Do it in a sound studio, California. All right, what is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
I already talked about it. The whiteboard.
Yeah, the whiteboard. There you go. I love it.
Yeah, so whiteboard pen. One of those Expo pens, which I always end up with it on my fingers. The whiteboard driver. Yeah, like literally getting my hands dirty with design.
There you go. Do you ever get your Sharpie and your Expo mixed up and accidentally write a Sharpie on the whiteboard?
I think I have done that in my career twice, perhaps. I learned that lesson the hard way, and so it stuck with me ever since.
Yeah, I actually had a friend who showed me a technique. If you accidentally draw on a whiteboard with a Sharpie, you can use the whiteboard marker to go over it, let it dry, and then it'll come right off.
That's right.
I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, you got to let it dry, though. You can't do it when it's wet because it'll just smear it, but you got to do it when it's dry.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's a smart thing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you got to let it dry. Like, wait like 30 seconds, blow on it or something, and then it'll just wipe right off.
Not too long, because I've also tried it when it was like, it had been like 10 days, and then it didn't work.
Oh, yeah. It's got to be like relatively soon, yeah. Because I guess, like, I don't know, the Sharpie ink, I guess, is meant to be permanent, hence the permanent marker nomenclature.
Yes.
But anyway, that's a really cool technique. I love that. Yeah, I actually did that. I messed that up.
The other special component is not just the whiteboard, but the room full of people with the whiteboard, right? Because design in a vacuum is useless. So, yeah.
Right. Oh, that's true. Yeah. You got to have the people. All right, Scott. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm really excited we got a chance to talk about this. Before we get out of here, one more time, tell everybody where they can find you. Give yourself a plug.
Okay. Yes. LinkedIn. I'm definitely on LinkedIn, and my contact details are on there. And I'm just about to publish a website, scottmackie.com. Should be up in the next couple of days, i.e., before this podcast goes live. So we'd love to hear from people.
Right on. Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it, man.
Yes. Bye.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Scott and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on this balance between testing early before it's polished and making sure that you do get to a point where you can actually sell that beautiful thing. Again, remember, humans were weird. We like to judge books by their cover, even though we know we shouldn't. We still do. Have you figured this out yet? I've been doing this for a long time. I don't think I have yet. But if you have, let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I would love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you can imagine. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. One more shout out to Manuel for leaving some fantastic feedback for the Beyond UX Design book. Don't forget, if you pick up the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book and leave some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show, a badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker, a free book, or even a chance to have a one-on-one with me. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book and pre-order your copy today. If you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out all those Patreon sponsorship packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin by supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. And there are some awesome perks like a badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker. You can get a shout out on the show every week. There's even a package to meet with me for 30 minutes every month. Do yourself a favor and head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/storytelling and use the promo code BeyondUX at checkout to get 10% off Jeff's storytelling course to learn some super valuable ways to influence your team and advance your UX career. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. So you went from Cambridge, UK to Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yep, that was it.
I didn't even make that connection until just now.